In 2017, Harvard Business reported that more than 70% of employees have access to corporate data they should not. When permissions are this disconnected from actual job functions, it suggests the organization lacks a structural framework to define who can see what and why. To address this, we are looking at the frameworks detailed in Chapter 8 of Information Technology Policy and Strategy, published in 2024 by Professor Richard Boating of the University of Ghana Business School. Professor Boating defines data governance as the comprehensive lifecycle management system that ensures data quality, integrity, security, and usability across an entire organization. Without this structural governance, data operates as an operational liability. It becomes a risk to be managed rather than a resource that can be reliably used for strategy. Consider AlphaTech Corporation, a mid-sized IT firm. Their internal systems were struggling with conflicting file formats across departments, broken audit logs, and unauthorized access pathways. Because no specific roles were assigned to oversee the quality of their information, the errors in their systems eventually led to inaccurate executive decision-making. The executive team issued a mandate to rebuild their data framework from the ground up, utilizing the Data Governance Institute's 8 core principles. A systemic failure of this magnitude requires more than a software patch. It requires a structural, principle-based overhaul of how the company handles information. The first principle is integrity. At AlphaTech, this materialized when team members actively identified and reported data migration errors before implementation. The second principle, transparency, was achieved by deploying a centralized portal. Every data-related decision was documented and made accessible to the organization. Third is auditability. By maintaining comprehensive logs of all data processes, AlphaTech successfully proved regulatory compliance during a rigorous internal audit. Fourth is accountability. The company eliminated operational ambiguity by assigning explicit oversight tasks to specific roles, ensuring every dataset had a defined owner. These first 4 principles change the baseline of organizational culture. They shift the focus from concealing errors to maintaining a verifiable record of data decisions. The fifth principle, stewardship, meant AlphaTech assigned dedicated staff to oversee the daily quality and accuracy of specific, high-value data assets. Sixth is checks and balances. The company implemented mandatory cross-functional meetings to balance control between their business units and their technology teams. Seventh is standardization. AlphaTech implemented common data models and unified metadata standards, ensuring that systems and different departments could communicate accurately. Finally, change management. The company developed training pipelines to adapt their operations whenever external data protection regulations evolved. These 4 systemic principles prevent any single department from monopolizing data control, while ensuring the organization can adapt to new requirements. This hierarchy maps the 4 roles. Top-tier data owners define strategy. Beneath them, data stewards execute daily oversight and enforce compliance. Data custodians manage technical infrastructure and security. Finally, data users adhere to policies during daily operations. This link between data management and trust is evident at Spotify. They must convince artists and labels that their play count data is accurate and their reimbursement process is fair. Their survival depends on the integrity of that information. As the Spotify case suggests, governance principles remain theoretical until they are assigned to specific, accountable human roles. To codify these roles, an organization builds a governance policy document. This architectural blueprint contains the purpose, principles, and compliance requirements for regulations like GDPR. This flowchart outlines the 11-step workflow. It begins with information gathering, defining goals, and developing principles. Next, organizations create standards, establish frameworks, and implement security. Then, builds quality controls, integrate data, and define roles, finishing with monitoring and a data catalog. Large institutions scale these frameworks based on their complexity. The University of New South Wales, for example, utilizes one standard policy for general data and a separate, specific policy for research data and materials. Executing this sequential 11-step process prevents reactive gap-filling by forcing a comprehensive, proactive data architecture. Even a fully developed policy document lacks authority without formal executive enforcement mechanisms. Enforcement requires a 4-tier approval pipeline: initial review by the CTO, oversight by the IT Council, review by the Business Executive Committee, and final board approval. Once approved, this policy is rapidly disseminated through corporate portals, direct email notifications, and mandatory employee training sessions. Systematic executive approval and widespread dissemination are the mechanisms that transform a static document into active operational law. Watch exactly how this data stream flows through the organized digital grid. This illustrates Professor Boateng's core argument. Governance transitions an organization away from reactive data hoarding and toward proactive utilization. The process involves establishing the 8 core principles, operationalizing the 4 tiers of roles, and engineering the approved 11-step policy. This structural framework is the method used to guarantee data integrity and regulatory compliance at an enterprise scale. Following these steps ensures that every piece of information is accounted for. It provides the structural proof that an organization is meeting its legal obligations while maintaining the accuracy of its data.